sound of slow rain, distant thunder, a faint ticking clock. When the night is silent and the world outside sleeps, the darkness begins to whisper. These aren't stories to help you sleep. They're stories to keep you awake, real encounters, real fear. And tonight, you'll hear 9 of them. Welcome to MB Dark TV, where the night never ends. It was one of those nights when the rain doesn't fall. It pours, the kind that makes the streets glisten like black glass, and every shadow feels alive. Emma sat alone in her small apartment on the 3rd floor, sipping tea that had already gone cold. She had lived there for 6 months, ever since she'd moved to the city for a new job. It wasn't perfect. The walls were thin, and the hallway lights flickered like they had a pulse of their own. But it was home. At around midnight, the power flickered once, twice, and then steadied. Emma barely noticed. She was scrolling through her phone, half asleep, when she heard something. A whisper, soft, distant, or maybe close. She couldn't tell. Emma! Her name, clear as day. She froze. The sound came from the hallway, right outside her bedroom door. But she lived alone. She turned off the TV, listening. The apartment went completely silent, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Then, after a few seconds, she heard it again. Emma, open the door. The voice was quiet, but not muffled. It sounded like someone standing just behind the door, speaking through a smile. She called out, "Who's there?" But her voice trembled, breaking halfway through. No answer. Only the sound of the rain pressing against the windows. She thought maybe it was a dream, that strange space between sleep and waking. But when she reached for the doorknob, her hand was cold, shaking. She didn't open it. Instead, she stepped back, staring. The whisper stopped, replaced by an awful stillness. Emma turned on every light in the apartment. The brightness made her feel safer, though the shadows still clung to the corners. She stayed up until nearly 3 a.m., listening, waiting for any sign that she wasn't alone. But nothing came. Finally, exhaustion took over, and she fell asleep on the couch with the TV still glowing faintly. The next morning, she convinced herself it had been her imagination. She laughed about it while brushing her teeth, telling herself it was stress, or maybe the pipes in the walls. The old building made noises all the time, didn't it? That night, she double-checked the locks before bed. She even slid a chair under the doorknob just in case. Then she crawled under her blanket and tried to sleep. Around 1:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. A notification, a sound recording. She hadn't opened any apps. It had just started recording. She frowned, sat up, and pressed play. For a few seconds, all she could hear was static. Then a whisper, faint and breathy, right next to the microphone. Emma. Her stomach turned. The whisper was identical to what she'd heard the night before. She deleted the file immediately, threw the phone across the room, and sat in silence, heart pounding so loud it filled her ears. She told herself she'd leave in the morning, maybe stay with a friend, just one more night. But sometimes, one more night is all it takes. At 2:43 a.m., a loud knock echoed from the bedroom door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She stared at it from her bed, barely breathing. Then came the whisper again. "Emma, please open the door." Her eyes filled with tears. "Go away," she shouted. But the whisper didn't stop. It grew softer, slower, almost pleading. I'm cold. Please." Her instincts screamed at her not to move, but curiosity, or maybe fear, dragged her closer. She picked up her phone, turned on the flashlight, and approached the door. The beam trembled in her hands. The knocking had stopped. "Who are you?" she whispered. For a few seconds, silence. Then a response, so quiet it almost wasn't there. "I'm already inside." The light flickered. The door creaked open an inch, just enough for her to see the darkness beyond. Something shifted in that darkness. Something with her own reflection. It was like staring into a mirror made of shadow. Her own face looked back at her, but it smiled when she didn't. Emma stumbled backward, tripped over the chair, and the flashlight hit the floor, spinning. In that fractured light, she saw bare feet, wet, pale feet, step into the room. She screamed. The lights flickered once, then everything went black. When morning came, her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, complained to the landlord. She said someone had been talking and crying in Emma's apartment all night, like two voices arguing in whispers. The landlord knocked on Emma's door for an hour before calling the police. They broke it open around noon. The TV was still on. The teacup from 2 nights ago still on the table. The chair she'd placed under the doorknob had been moved aside neatly. But Emma was gone. Her phone was lying face up on the floor beside the door. The screen showed a single audio file recorded at 2:47 a.m. The police played it back. Run, breathing. A faint voice whispering almost tenderly, "You shouldn't have opened it." Then silence. It started with something simple. A nightmare. Not the kind you wake up from sweating and forget in minutes. No, this one stayed. It clung to her thoughts long after sunrise. Her name was Clara, 34 years old, a nurse who worked night shifts at a small hospital outside Denver. She was used to seeing tired faces, hearing groans in the dark, and walking through empty corridors that echoed like tunnels. But for the past few weeks, something strange had begun happening after her shifts. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it, a flicker of a face. Not a dream exactly, but an image burned into the back of her mind. It was pale, colorless, and always awake. The eyes never blinked. At first, she blamed the coffee. She stopped drinking it. Then she blamed the stress. She took days off. Nothing helped. By the third sleepless night, Clara felt her mind fraying at the edges. She'd lie in bed, the world completely still, and listen to her heartbeat echo in her ears. Then, just when she'd begin to drift, she'd hear a sound. A quiet breath beside her pillow. The first time she told herself it was her imagination. The second time she sat up fast enough to make her head spin. But the room was empty. That's when she started hearing it. A whisper, faint but clear, that came every night around 3 a.m. It never said much, just one sentence over and over, like a ritual. "Don't sleep yet. He's watching." The voice was low, neither male nor female, but full of warning. She tried recording it once, but when she played the file back, there was only silence. Still, every night, the whisper returned. Same words, same time. By the 5th day, her reflection in the mirror barely looked like her anymore. Eyes dark and sunken, lips cracked, skin pale as chalk. Her co-workers noticed. One even joked, "You look like one of your patients." She didn't laugh. That night she decided to fight it. She locked the doors, turned off her phone, and laid in bed, determined to sleep. She pressed her hands over her ears, blocking everything out. For a moment it worked, until she felt the bed sink slightly, as if someone sat down beside her. She didn't dare open her eyes. Then a whisper, closer than ever. "You shouldn't close them." Her eyes snapped open. The room was dark, but something was there. A shape sitting on the edge of her bed. A silhouette facing away from her. It wasn't moving, just watching the wall. Clara held her breath, frozen. The figure slowly turned its head toward her. It had no face, only skin stretched tight where the eyes and mouth should be. And yet, somehow, it smiled. She screamed and turned on the lamp, but there was nothing. The bed was empty. Her heart raced so fast, she thought it would stop. She didn't sleep that night, or the one after. Days turned into weeks. Her body refused to shut down. Doctors found nothing wrong. Extreme insomnia, they said. Psychological stress. They gave her pills. She never took them. Something deep inside told her not to. She started to hear the whisper even during the day now. In the hospital hallways, in the elevator, even in her own head. "Don't sleep yet. He's watching." Eventually, she stopped trying to rest altogether. She would sit in her kitchen at 4 a.m., lights on, staring at the doorway, waiting. Sometimes she thought she saw him standing there in the reflection of the glass window, the faceless figure, always still, always waiting. 3 weeks later, Clara's neighbor called the police after hearing noises from her apartment. Furniture moving, doors slamming, a woman crying. When they broke in, the lights were still on. Coffee cups everywhere, dozens of notes scribbled across the walls. All said the same thing, written over and over again. Greater than, "If I sleep, he'll come." They found her sitting in a chair by the window, eyes wide open. She was breathing, barely, but completely unresponsive. The doctor said her body had simply shut down from exhaustion. But one nurse swore that even in her coma, Clara's eyes never closed. Not once. She's still in the hospital to this day, eyes open, staring. And every night around 3 a.m., the monitors in her room flicker. And someone swears they hear a whisper from nowhere. "Don't sleep yet. He's watching." Rain had always calmed David. He liked the sound of it, the way it blurred the world outside his window into silver streaks. But that changed the night he started hearing the voices. It was late September, a week of constant storms. David lived alone in a small countryside house, surrounded by trees that bent under the wind like they were trying to whisper to each other. He worked from home as a freelance sound editor, the kind of job that made silence feel valuable. But lately, the silence had started to feel wrong. It began with static. Every time it rained, his old studio headset would pick up faint noise, like radio interference, a low hum, then something softer underneath. At first, he assumed it was the storm messing with the connection. But one night, as he adjusted the volume, he froze. Through the static, a voice whispered, "Can you hear me?" He ripped the headset off. The sound stopped immediately. Heart pounding, he played the recording back. There was nothing, just rain. The next day, curiosity overpowered fear. He waited for the rain again. Around midnight, the storm returned, heavy, cold, relentless. David sat at his desk, hit record, and listened. The whisper came sooner this time. "Don't ignore us." The voice was soft, almost pleading. It echoed faintly in both ears. Then another voice joined in, quieter, overlapping it like an echo in the distance. "Please, Help us." He pulled the headset off again, breathing fast. His skin prickled with goosebumps. But when he took them off, he realized the whisper hadn't stopped. It was coming from somewhere else now, from outside. He stepped to the window. The rain hammered the glass. Beyond it, only darkness. But the whispers were there, clearer than before, like dozens of voices overlapping, each trapped beneath the sound of the rain. "David," one said. He stumbled back. They knew his gnome. He shut all the windows, turned on music, tried to block them out. It didn't work. No matter what he did, the voices seeped through. Every drop of rain carried sound, murmurs, laughter, crying, sometimes words he couldn't understand. By morning, the storm had stopped. The silence felt heavy, almost unreal. For a moment he thought he was free. But then, when he turned on the faucet to make coffee, he froze. The running water was whispering. He turned it off instantly, heart racing. The voice that came through the sink wasn't from a speaker. It was alive. That night, the rain returned. He didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of the room with his headphones unplugged, listening as the whispers turned to screams. Hundreds of voices crying out from nowhere, echoing in perfect unison. "Let us in." He pressed his hands over his ears, shouting back, "Leave me alone." The storm raged harder. Thunder cracked so close, the house shook. The lights flickered, and in the moment of total darkness that followed, he heard it, a single voice right behind him. "We already are." He spun around, shining his phone's flashlight toward the sound. The beam landed on the window. Outside, shapes moved, dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass, watching him through the rain. Their mouths opened, but the sound didn't come from them. It came from the water itself, vibrating in the glass, whispering words he couldn't make out. He screamed and threw the lamp at the window. The glass shattered, and instantly, everything went silent. The rain stopped. The house fell into absolute stillness. When morning came, the police found David sitting in his studio, headphones on, eyes wide open. The computer screen still recorded static. The audio file ran for 7 hours straight, nothing but white noise. But when they played it through the lab's high-frequency filters, something faint emerged beneath the static. A whisper, distant and broken, greater than "He let us in." Since that night, every time it rains in that town, the locals say they hear faint voices in the storm. And if you listen too long, you'll start to hear your own name. It was 2:19 a.m. when Lily's phone buzzed. At first, she thought it was another spam call. She'd been getting a lot of those lately. But when she looked at the screen, her blood ran cold. The caller ID showed a familiar name. Her best friend, Anna. The problem was, Anna had been dead for 2 weeks. Lily stared at the glowing screen until the ringing stopped. Her hands trembled. She'd been trying to sleep, wrapped in silence and grief, when the call shattered the stillness of her apartment. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The phone vibrated again, this time a voicemail. Heart pounding, she pressed play. Static. Then a soft breath. "Lily." She sat up. It was Anna's voice, weak, distant, but unmistakable. Then came 3 words that froze her in place. Greater than "Don't come tomorrow." The message ended abruptly with a faint, wet sound, like someone dragging a finger across the microphone. Lily replayed it a dozen times. The timestamp was current, no tricks. The number really was Anna's, but her phone had been destroyed in the accident. She barely slept that night. Every creak, every sigh from the old pipes sounded like footsteps. By morning, she convinced herself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone had cloned the number, but the message felt real, too real. Later that day, she decided to visit Anna's old apartment to get closure. It hadn't been rented yet, and Lily still had a spare key. The place was quiet, dusty, the air heavy with something stale and forgotten. She walked into the bedroom. Everything was exactly as Anna had left it. Clothes folded on the chair, her favorite book open on the nightstand. The mirror still had fingerprints smudged across it. Then Lily's phone buzzed again. New message, a voice note. No number this time, just unknown. She hesitated, thumb hovering over play. Then slowly, she pressed it, static again. But beneath it, a whisper. Why didn't you listen? The sound came not from her phone, but from the room itself, like it was echoing inside the walls. She turned slowly, feeling the air grow colder. Then the phone screen flickered, glitched, and the voice continued, louder now, trembling with something like panic. Greater than, "He's here! He's—" The message cut off. A sudden knock echoed from the hallway. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Lily's heart hammered. She took a step toward the door, but her phone buzzed again. Another message. Same unknown sender. When she looked, it wasn't audio this time. It was a photo. Her own apartment door, taken from outside. The timestamp, 2:19 a.m. The exact time of the first call. She dropped the phone. The light in the room flickered once, twice, then went out completely. She ran toward the exit, fumbling with the key, but before she could open it, the screen of her phone lit up again on the floor. Incoming call. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she picked it up. The voice on the other end whispered her name. Lily. It sounded closer now, like someone speaking directly into her ear. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then came the same words from the voicemail, but this time slower, drawn out, almost like a sigh. Greater than, "Don't come tomorrow." The line went dead. The next morning, Lily didn't show up to work. Her co-worker assumed she overslept, but by noon, police were knocking on her door. They found the apartment empty, her phone lying on the bed, still recording. The file lasted 46 minutes. Most of it was silence, but at exactly 2:19 a.m., a faint voice whispered into the mic. She came anyway. There was a soft sound after, like a door creaking open. And then nothing. The investigation went nowhere. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. But one officer swore he heard a phone ringing from inside the walls while they were searching the apartment. It stopped as soon as they tore the wallpaper open. They never found the source. Since then, neighbors claim that when it rains, they sometimes hear a phone ringing faintly through the pipes around 2 a.m., and if you listen long enough, someone will whisper your name and tell you not to answer. It started as a reflection that didn't move. At first, David thought he was just exhausted. He worked late shifts at the hospital and sometimes came home so drained he could barely keep his eyes open while brushing his teeth. But that night, something was off. He lifted his toothbrush to his mouth, and in the mirror, his reflection didn't. It stood perfectly still, staring back at him. The same eyes, the same tired face, but motionless, frozen. David blinked hard, rubbed his face, then looked again. The reflection moved this time, brushing its teeth just as it should. He exhaled. "You need sleep, man. he muttered to himself. He turned off the bathroom light and went to bed. But the next night, it happened again. Only this time, the reflection smiled before moving. A slow, deliberate curl of the mouth. One that David didn't make. He froze, toothbrush halfway to his lips, staring at the thing in the glass. The grin widened, showing just a little too many teeth. Then, as he stumbled back, blinking in shock, the reflection resumed, mirroring him perfectly, as if nothing had happened. He tried to laugh it off. Maybe stress, maybe a trick of the light. But after that, he couldn't look in the mirror for long without feeling like something behind the glass was watching him. Waiting. A few nights later, David came home from another long shift. It was past midnight, and the apartment was dark except for the faint glow from the bathroom. The mirror light was on. He didn't remember leaving it that way. Inside, everything was quiet, until he saw it again. His reflection was standing there, facing him. But David was still in the hallway. He froze in the doorway, staring at the impossible sight. His reflection tilted its head slowly, like a curious animal. Then it raised one hand, palm open, pressing it against the inside of the glass. Without thinking, David raised his own hand. The moment his fingers touched the cold surface, a static shock jolted through him, sharp and freezing. He pulled away with a gasp, and his reflection stayed in place, hand still on the mirror, eyes wide and lifeless. He backed out of the bathroom, turned off the light, and slammed the door shut. He didn't open it again that night. For the next week, he covered every mirror in his apartment, even the one on his phone. Sleep came in fragments, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw that grin, that face, frozen, patient, waiting. Then one morning, when sunlight slipped through the curtains, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The mirror in the bathroom, the one he had covered, was uncovered again. The sheet was neatly folded on the floor. He stood there, shaking, staring at it. Slowly, he stepped closer. The mirror's surface was fogged, as if someone had just stepped out of a hot shower, and written across the glass, with a finger, were 3 words. Greater than "let me out." He stumbled back, heart racing, and grabbed his phone to take a picture. But the moment he opened the camera app, his reflection appeared, grinning again. Except this time, it wasn't in sync with him. It was closer to the glass than before, face pressed against it, eyes dark and hollow. Then the phone camera glitched, a static flicker, and when it came back, there was no reflection at all. The mirror showed only the empty bathroom behind him. Terrified, David reached out to touch it. The glass was warm. That night he called his friend Eric, asking him to come over. Eric laughed it off at first, until he saw it himself. They stood together in front of the mirror, both visible at first. But when Eric waved, his reflection vanished completely, leaving only David's behind. Eric left without saying a word. He never answered David's calls again. 2 days later, David stopped showing up to work. When a co-worker visited his apartment, the door was unlocked, the lights off, and the bathroom mirror cracked from end to end. On the sink, they found a single note written in shaky handwriting, greater than "He's not me anymore." The police investigation found no sign of forced entry, but one of the officers swore he saw movement in the mirror as they were leaving. A face watching from behind the fractured glass. They replaced the mirror when the new tenant moved in. She says sometimes when the room is quiet and the light hits just right, she can see a man's reflection behind her. standing perfectly still, smiling faintly. And if she looks long enough, he stops pretending to be her. Ethan loved the quiet of the woods. Every weekend, he drove 2 hours away from the city to a remote cabin that used to belong to his grandfather. It was small, old, and half swallowed by pine trees, but it gave him peace, a place where the world's noise finally disappeared. Until one night, the forest began to talk back. It started subtly. Faint whispers when the wind passed through the trees. He told himself it was just the sound of branches rubbing together. But one night, while sitting by the fire outside the cabin, he heard something clearer. A voice. It called his name. "Ethan!" He froze, flashlight trembling in his hand. The sound came from deep between the trees, too far for anyone to be standing there, yet close enough to feel like it was just behind the dark line of trunks. He called out, "Who's there?" No answer, just the whisper of leaves moving again. He went back inside and locked the door. The whisper returned that night, faint but steady, right outside his window, repeating his name softly, over and over, until sleep dragged him under. In the morning, he found footprints outside the cabin, bare feet, small ones, like a child's. He thought maybe some hikers had gotten lost, but the nearest trail was miles away, and the prints, they started at the edge of the forest, circled the cabin twice, then vanished, as if the person had stepped into the air. That night, the voices returned, not one, but several this time. They whispered in unison, like a broken choir, "Ethan, come back." He pressed his hands against his ears, but the sound wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside the cabin, inside the walls, inside his head. The lights flickered and the air grew cold. He shouted that he wasn't listening, but the voices grew louder, desperate, pleading. He ran outside into the open clearing, clutching his flashlight like a weapon. "Show yourself!" he yelled. The forest went silent. Then, from between the trees, came a single soft reply, "We can't." His light trembled across the trunks, revealing shapes, faint silhouettes of people standing far back, unmoving, faces pale and blurred like fog. Dozens of them, watching. He stumbled back toward the cabin, heart pounding. But when he reached the door, it was already open. Inside, every light was on. His old radio, one that hadn't worked in years, was playing static. Beneath it, he heard faint crying. He approached slowly. The crying grew louder. When he touched the radio, the static cleared for a moment, and a voice whispered through the speaker, "We never left." The radio burst into noise again. Ethan dropped it and ran for his car. But the forest seemed alive now. Every step he took, the ground echoed with faint whispers. The trees creaked like they were leaning closer. When he reached his car, the engine wouldn't start. The headlights flickered once and died. Then, from the darkness behind him, a voice spoke again, not like before, not soft or far away, but right beside his ear. "You shouldn't have come back." He turned and saw nothing, only darkness so thick it seemed to move. Then, one by one, pale faces began to appear between the trees, their eyes hollow, mouths open but soundless now. He slammed his eyes shut and screamed. When he opened them, he was back inside the cabin. Daylight streaming through the window. His clothes were wet, covered in mud. His car keys lay on the floor beside the door. He tried to convince himself it was a nightmare, until he checked his phone. The time was still 2:37 a.m., but the sun was out. He grabbed his things and left without looking back. When he returned to the city, he sold the cabin immediately. A few months later, the new owner, a retired hunter, was found dead inside, his face frozen in terror. The coroner wrote, "Heart failure," but the deputy who found the body said there was something stranger. On the inside walls of the cabin, carved deep into the wood, were words written over and over. Greater than, we never left. Less than. And every time someone tries to sand them down, the voices start again, soft at first, like wind between trees. And then they say your name. There's a strange room in the old Blackwell Hotel. It's not listed on any floor plan, not mentioned in any record, but the staff know it's there. Room 313. Guests aren't supposed to stay there anymore. In fact, it shouldn't even exist. The hallway jumps straight from 312 to 314. But sometimes, late at night, when the lights flicker and the elevator groans like it's tired of moving, the door appears. And if you're unlucky enough to see it, it will open for you. Alex didn't believe in that kind of thing. He was a journalist chasing urban legends, the kind of stories people whispered about online but never proved. When he heard about the missing room, he booked a night at the Blackwell. The hotel was old, the kind of place where the wallpaper curled like peeling skin and the air smelled faintly of damp wood. The clerk, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes, slid him his keycard without a smile. "Your room's 312, she said. "Don't wander the halls after midnight." He laughed softly. "Because of the ghosts?" She didn't laugh back. "Because the hall changes," she said quietly, "and some doors aren't meant to open." That night, Alex sat in his room reviewing his notes. His recorder blinked red beside him, capturing every creak and groan of the building. Outside, rain pressed against the windows. At 11:57 p.m., the power flickered. At 11:58, the hallway went completely dark. When the lights came back, the clock on the wall read 12:01 a.m. But his phone still said 11:59. Confused, he walked into the hallway. That's when he saw it. A door he swore hadn't been there before. Room 313. Black door, silver handle, and a faint sound coming from behind it, like someone whispering into a radio, words just out of reach. He pressed his ear to the wood. Nothing. Then, as he turned to walk away, a voice from inside said clearly, "Come in, Alex." His breath caught. He hadn't told anyone his name. The handle turned by itself. The door opened. Inside was another hotel room. But the lights were dim and everything looked slightly wrong, like a reflection with too much shadow. The air was heavy, thick. The window showed the same view as his room, but the rain outside was falling upward. He took one cautious step inside. The door closed softly behind him. The clock on the nightstand read 11:59 p.m. and stayed there. It didn't move. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The screen flickered, then went black. The moment it did, the whispering started again. This time, it was closer. "Stay," the voice said. "You don't have to leave." Alex spun around, searching. The bathroom light was on. He crept closer, heart hammering, and saw movement in the mirror. A man, pale, drenched, eyes wide, was staring back at him. But it wasn't his reflection. The man was behind him. He turned, and the bathroom was empty. He stumbled backward, knocking over the lamp. The room plunged into darkness. He ran for the door. But when he pulled it open, there was only another hallway. Endless, lined with doors, each numbered 313. He ran, tried every handle, every lock, but each door led to the same room again and again. The same clock, the same whisper, the same voice. Greater than stay. Then he noticed something horrifying. Every time he returned to the bed, someone was sitting on it. Closer to his shape, his face, his clothes. Each loop, the figure became more like him. By the last one, it was identical. He stared at it, trembling. "Who are you?" he whispered. The other, Alex, smiled faintly. "You stayed," it said. The lights flickered, and for the first time, the clock ticked. Midnight. Everything went black. When Alex's recorder was found a week later, it contained only one file, 47 minutes of static, followed by his voice whispering, "It's always 11:59. The hotel has been closed for years now, but people still say that sometimes, on rainy nights, the elevator stops on a floor that isn't supposed to exist. And when it opens, there's just one door waiting there. Room 313. If you ever see it, don't look at the clock, because if it still says 11:59, you're already inside." It began with a sound, a soft, rhythmic thump that came from the ground. At first, Michael thought it was the wind rattling loose stones, but the cemetery was silent, too silent. He was there late that night because of a dare. His friends told him no one had the courage to spend an hour inside the old Hollow Creek Cemetery after midnight. It wasn't fenced, just surrounded by dying trees and fog that hung low to the earth. Michael brought a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and his phone. "It's just stories," he'd said. "Dead people don't wake up." At 12:07 a.m., he heard the sound again. Thump, soft, slow, coming from one particular grave near the center, a tilted headstone with no name, just the date. 1874. ? The question mark bothered him. He knelt beside it, pressing his ear closer. The ground beneath him vibrated faintly, once every few seconds, like a heartbeat. He laughed nervously, telling himself it had to be water underground, or maybe some small animal. Then something breathed. It wasn't wind, it wasn't movement. It was a slow, wet inhale coming from beneath the soil. He stumbled back, flashlight trembling. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking. No answer, just another sound, a faint scraping, like fingers brushing against wood. He swallowed hard, scanning the area. The fog was thicker now, curling around the gravestones like living smoke. Every shadow seemed to lean toward him. He turned to leave. That's when his phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message greater than "don't go." He froze. The message came again, greater than "you woke me." His flashlight flickered. He turned it toward the grave. The dirt was moving, rising. He took a step back, heart slamming in his chest. The soil cracked, shifted, and a faint voice came through, muffled but desperate. Greater than "help. Please." Every instinct screamed at him to run, but part of him couldn't. The voice sounded human. Weak, trapped. He dropped to his knees, started digging. The dirt was cold and heavy, and every handful released a faint, sickly smell. After a few minutes, his fingers scraped against wood. He cleared the rest, panting. A small coffin, blackened with rot, lay just beneath the surface. The breathing came faster now, shallow and ragged. "Hang on," he shouted. "I'm getting you out." He pried at the lid, splintering it open just enough to shine his light inside. Empty, except for a single fresh handprint pressed against the inside of the wood. Then the breathing stopped. Michael staggered back, horror freezing his limbs. The fog had thickened into a wall. He could barely see the headstones anymore. The air smelled of wet soil and something old, like breath that had been trapped for years. His phone buzzed again. Another message, greater than "behind you." He spun around. Nothing. The ground beneath his feet shifted. A pale hand burst from the soil and grabbed his ankle. He screamed, kicking free, stumbling backward. More hands broke through the earth, reaching, clawing. The graves around him were opening, silent but alive. He ran, tripping over stones, light flashing wildly. The whispers followed him now, hundreds of them, gasping between words. "You woke us. You woke us." He reached the gate, or where the gate should have been. The cemetery stretched endlessly in every direction, fog swallowing every path. The thumping returned, louder, rhythmic, all around him now. He fell to his knees, clutching his head as the ground itself seemed to pulse beneath him. Then suddenly, everything stopped. Silence. The fog began to lift. The graves were still again. He was alone. He bolted out of the cemetery and didn't stop running until sunrise. When the police found his flashlight and phone the next day, both were half buried near the unmarked grave. The last video on the phone showed Michael whispering into the camera, shaking and pale. "There's someone still breathing under there." Then the camera turned suddenly, pointed at the grave, and you could hear it too. That slow, steady sound. Thump, thump, like a heartbeat coming from the dirt. They sealed the area off after that. But locals say on quiet nights, when the fog drifts over the cemetery, you can still hear breathing if you stand by that nameless grave. And if you whisper your name, it whispers it back. When Claire was a child, she was afraid of the dark. Not because of monsters or stories or shadows, but because the dark spoke to her. It started when she was 8. Every night, after her parents tucked her in and turned off the lights, she would hear a faint whisper from under her bed. At first it was just sounds, soft breathing, quiet humming. But then, one night, it spoke. "Claire." She froze. The voice was calm, slow, and close. Too close. "Who's there?" she whispered back. A long silence. Then, "Don't look down." She screamed, of course. Her parents ran in, turned the lights on, and found nothing under the bed but dust and a few forgotten toys. They told her it was a dream, and for a while she believed them. But the voice came back, every night, always the same, quiet, patient, calling her name. Sometimes it laughed softly, like it knew something she didn't. As she grew older, it stopped. By the time she turned 17, she convinced herself it had been her imagination. She left for college, moved into a dorm, and finally slept without fear. For a while. Then one night, she woke up in the dark. Her roommate was gone for the weekend. The window opened slightly, moonlight painting pale lines across the floor. She lay there listening to the wind. Then she heard it. That same voice, older now, rougher, but unmistakable. "Claire." She sat up slowly, every muscle in her body tense. "No," she whispered to herself. "No, not again." The voice sighed from under the bed. "You left me alone." Her throat tightened. "You're not real," she said, but her voice cracked. It chuckled, low and wet, like air bubbling through water. "I've always been real." You just stopped listening? She reached for her phone to turn on the flashlight, but the screen stayed black. The air under the bed seemed to breathe, slow, steady, like lungs filling and emptying. She swung her legs over the side, forcing herself to look. "Show yourself," she said, her voice shaking. Nothing, just darkness. Then the whisper again, closer now, almost in her ear. "Don't look down." Her pulse pounded in her throat. She pulled her legs back onto the bed and sat frozen. The mattress dipped slightly, as if something, was crawling beneath it. The whisper turned into a low growl. "Why did you come back?" Claire's eyes darted to the door, but it was closed tight. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A new message. Unknown number. "You shouldn't have looked." Her breath caught. Slowly the bed began to shake. Not violently, but rhythmically, as though something underneath was breathing heavily, pressing upward. Then the whisper turned into words again. "I waited for you every night. I counted the years." She screamed, leaping from the bed and running to the door. But when she grabbed the handle, it was ice cold. The whisper followed her, right behind her head now. "Where are you going, Claire?" The lights flickered. The door wouldn't open. She turned, heart hammering, and saw the mattress lifting from below, as if hands were pushing it up. Something crawled out from underneath. It wasn't a person. It was a shape, long, thin, its skin like stretched paper, its mouth fixed in a grin that didn't belong to anything human. It tilted its head, bones cracking with every movement. "You looked," it whispered. Claire stumbled backward until she hit the wall. "Please," she sobbed. "What do you want?" The creature smiled wider. "To tuck you in." The lights went out. When her roommate returned 2 days later, she found the room undisturbed, except for one thing. The bed was perfectly made, the blanket tucked so tight it looked untouched. But when she tried to pull it back, she couldn't. Something was holding it down. She called campus security. When they lifted the mattress, they found nothing underneath, only a dark handprint pressed into the wood floor. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. A new message appeared on the screen, from an unknown number, greater than "She's finally asleep." They say that room stays empty now. Students who move in don't stay long. Some report hearing breathing under the bed, or feel a hand brush their leg when they try to sleep. And if you ever wake up at night to hear a voice whisper your name from the dark, whatever you do, don't look down. Sound of slow breathing, faint wind, a single heartbeat. If you're still awake, you've made it through the night. But remember, the dark doesn't end when the video does. It waits just beyond the light of your screen. Thank you for listening. This is 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏 TV, where nightmares never sleep.